Throughout philosophy, or just the history of human thought in general, there has always been differing views on human nature. After all, I mean, you're human, at least I hope so. Therefore, wouldn't you be at least curious about what your true nature is? And then there's other people. Sometimes you come across some interaction between people that leads you to lose faith in humanity, as the saying goes. But then there are other moments that restore your faith in humanity. So what is it exactly? Take a history of Western philosophy class and you'll come across philosophers arguing about human nature and the state of nature, but Eastern philosophy also offers some unique perspectives on the issue, perspectives that unfortunately are often overlooked. In this video, we're going to be looking at the Confucian philosopher Xunzi in his self-titled book where he argues that human nature is evil. So we all know about Confucius. Even non-philosophy people know about this dude. And he was so big that he had a lot of disciples that carried on his ideas but also split and disagreed with one another. Because really, how boring would it be if you're just a carbon copy of your teacher? You want to make a name for yourself, right? Well, one of these disciples was named Mengzi, who wrote a book named after himself, and in that book he argued that human nature was good, basically. And in this video we're dealing with another Confucian disciple, Xunzi, who is responding to Mengzi arguing that human nature is evil. Side note, I'm Chinese American, but I'm not a Chinese historian or anything. Can someone tell me why all these dudes end their name in Z? It's becoming a hell of a pattern. So getting into the Xunzi, he repeats this one phrase over and over again, which you should memorize. Man's nature is evil. Goodness is the result of conscious activity. He literally repeats this phrase after every paragraph, so don't lose it. But what does it mean? Let's start with this first part, that man's nature is evil. Xunzi makes reference to being born and being a child as an indicator of our true nature. It's during this time that we're hyper-emotional and impulsive. Essentially, there's not much conscious activity. We just do what we feel we should do without much thought. It is the way with man's nature that as soon as he is born, he begins to depart from his original naivete and simplicity. So one way of understanding what Xunzi means by human nature is not only our emotional side, but kinda the state we were in when we were kids, because that emotional side was so strong. Now this begs the question, and I'm sure you've thought about it when you're on a plane trying to sleep with a screaming baby. Are kids evil? I know, it's a weird question. So on the one hand, a kid does act off emotions mainly. Not really reasoning things out, but acting just on impulse. As a kid, my dumbass tried stealing a greeting card that had a lion on it, just because someone in my class liked lions and I wanted to give it to them. I legit did not think twice about hiding it in my jacket cause I emotionally wanted to get that card and just blocked out any real reasoning behind it. On the other hand, there is something nice about childhood when we reflect back on it. There's this simplicity to it, to just going outside and playing with your friends, not worrying about all the chaos in the world. So I don't know, I'll ask you guys, what do you think? Are kids evil, or is there some things that kids actually do better than adults? Xunzi gives this example about dining and how it's respectful to let your elders eat first. As a kid, since you're impulsive, you might ignore those moral rules altogether and just dig in. It takes conscious activity to do good. And this is a good segue into the second part of the quote, that goodness is a result of conscious activity. During the whole human nature debate, the person saying human nature is evil has to explain instances where humans do good things. Here, Xunzi does this by pointing to things like effort, consideration, learning, and willpower. Therefore, man must first be transformed by the instructions of a teacher and guided by ritual principles, and only then will he be able to observe the dictates of courtesy and humility, obey the forms and rules of society, and achieve order. So I view this as there being three big things at play to produce goodness. First are the instructions of teachers, who I guess today we might say are moralizers in our society. Second are the ritual principles, which we may generally equate to good acts or practices deemed to be good. And finally, there's the conscious effort of the person to listen to those teachers and to follow through with those practices. Now there is a big unspoken issue that we've kind of been ignoring throughout this whole video, and that's what good and evil is. For those curious, this is how Xunzi defines these. All men in the world, past and present, agree in defining goodness as that which is upright, reasonable, and orderly, and evil as that which is prejudiced, irresponsible, and chaotic. This is the distinction between good and evil. So whether you take Xunzi's own definition of good and evil, or you take up the teachings of a moral philosopher of your preference, there is still this relationship of teacher and student. So we could see that part being satisfied even today. then actually following through on those teachings could satisfy those other elements. Now that's generally Xunzi's position on human nature, but he has a very familiar sounding argument to help support this. Essentially, he believes that the evil nature of humans requires not only these ritual principles and conscious action, but governments to enforce all of this. If the nature of man were good, we could dispense with sage kings and forget about ritual principles. But if it is evil, then we must go along with the sage kings and honor ritual principles. Now this could lead into a whole rabbit hole of political philosophy, but what I find interesting are the parallels between this philosophy and a philosophy held by someone roughly 1800 years later in England. We're probably all familiar with Thomas Hobbes and his argument for government in light of the state of nature. And Hobbes' view of the state of nature is pretty brutal, and I'm sure Xunzi would agree with this view. Just a cool little connection. Anyways, what do you think about this argument? Do you think the state of nature without government would be harsh due to the evil nature of humans? And what do you think about Xunzi's position overall? Comment below your thoughts as well as your favorite Chinese philosopher whose name probably ends in Z. Subscribe for more philosophy content, and I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.